Actually, the bride can't have children, and I've always been against the marriage, but my son insisted, so I had no choice. In the middle of the wedding reception, the mother-in-law, standing on the stage to deliver her speech, blurted out something shocking. She boldly declared my infertility in front of all the attendees. Well, as you can see, the bride is a barren failure. But she's a career woman and she earns well, so I reluctantly accepted the marriage. I was left speechless by her audacity. How could she label a woman who can't have children a failure and shame her in front of everyone? The mother-in-law, who was completely oblivious to the horrifying words she had just uttered, proudly scanned the room with a triumphant look on her face. The wedding hall fell silent at the unexpected insult from the mother-in-law. My name is Catherine. I am a 31-year-old office worker at a well-known company. I belong to the glamorous department of product development, where I'm responsible for planning new products. I've been involved in several hit products so far, and I find my job very fulfilling. Though I'm content with my work and happy, I have a secret I can't tell anyone. That is, I'm infertile. I found out 5 years ago that I can't have children. I remember feeling shocked and devastated at the time. I felt worthless, and I lost hope for the future. In fact, the boyfriend I was dating at the time ended up breaking up with me. Being overwhelmed by sadness and frustration, the only thing that could uplift me was my job. I worked so I wouldn't have time to dwell on unnecessary thoughts. Looking back, I think I was avoiding reality. But thanks to my hard work, a product I was deeply involved in became a big hit, and my evaluation at work improved. Since I couldn't have children, I thought I had no choice but to give up on marriage. I was convinced that contributing to society through work was the only path I had in life. But then, an unexpected encounter came my way. At a meeting for product development, I met a man my age from a client company. This man changed my fate. His name is David. He's the son of the president of the client company, and he's the head of the planning department. David and I exchanged contact information right away. Initially, we only communicated for work, but gradually our private exchanges increased. Eventually, we started dating, and it turned into a relationship. I thought I could never fall in love again, so meeting him felt like a miracle. David is a very kind and devoted man, and to such a man, I couldn't bring myself to reveal my secret. If David found out that I was infertile, he would surely leave me. I was scared at the thought. But I couldn't keep secrets from David, who treated me with sincerity. I didn't know what would happen, but I decided to be honest about my body. I made up my mind and told David that I was infertile. He'll leave me? I thought it was possible. Despite being resolved, I was anxious. But when I gathered the courage to talk, he started to cry after hearing it. He comforted me, saying, "It must have been tough. Thank you for telling me." His kindness made me cry, and I remembered it like it was yesterday. In the end, the breakup I feared did not come, and my relationship with David continued smoothly from that day. On our second anniversary, David celebrated at a restaurant. He opened a small case in front of me, revealing a ring, and then he spoke. "Catherine, I want you to marry me." It was an unexpected proposal. My heart pounded with joy, but I also felt a wave of anxiety. "David, are you sure about me? I can't have a baby. We can't have our own child. Are you still okay with that?" Even though David understands my situation, the weight of marriage is something different. I couldn't immediately say yes to his proposal. "Yeah, it doesn't matter. I want to spend the rest of my life with you, Catherine. Even when things get tough, even when we're sad, I want us to live through it all together." David reassured me, taking my anxiety into account. At that moment, I might have shed a lifetime's worth of tears. Since the day I was diagnosed as infertile, I had never dreamt that this day would come. I knew then that I could face anything as long as I was with him. I accepted his proposal, certain of my feelings. I want to live my life with you too, David. Thank you for always caring for me. I look forward to our future together. And so we quickly began preparations for our wedding. I was already past 30. I was eager to become a wife, to officially join our lives together as soon as possible. It's funny how much you want to rush things once a proposal is on the table. Now that marriage was becoming a reality, I felt it all the more. But before anything else, we had to meet David's parents. We had met them a few times before, but we really hadn't had a proper conversation. We set a date to meet and tell them about our engagement. But the news of our marriage did not go smoothly. While his father was very happy, his mother kept a stern face throughout. And then, "Catherine, I can't accept that you're going to marry David." She expressed her opposition to our marriage. "Why?" Before I could speak, David questioned his mother. As she continued to glare at me, she explained her reason. "You can't have children, right? That means we won't have any grandchildren, doesn't it? Our only son David can't have a child. Is there anything worse?" She brought up the very thing I didn't want to be confronted with. I was prepared to face blame for being infertile, but hearing it said outright really hurt. Her words left me without a reply. "You understand, right? David is set to become the next president of the company. It's only natural that we expect his wife to produce an heir. Marrying someone who can't do that, I won't allow it." She continued to deny our marriage in a forceful tone. I was fully aware that David was the future head of the company, and I understood that his parents would want him to have a child soon. But David proposed to me knowing all this. Not being able to have a child with David is painful for me too. Even though we chose to get married knowing all of this, her words were too harsh. "I'm the one who said it didn't matter." David jumped in, defending me against his mother. "Stop blaming Catherine. Don't trample over our decisions like this." David spoke up for me when I was lost for words. His dad was also angry at his mom, saying, "How can you say such a thing?" But no matter what anyone said, his mother remained unmoved, her expression unchanged. "I'm not saying anything wrong," she declared before leaving the table, indicating she had no more to discuss. In the end, our conversation that day didn't lead to any resolution. Still, it didn't change our firm decision to get married. We took the plunge and registered our marriage with his father's approval. We knew if we waited for her approval, we might never get married. "It doesn't matter if my mom is against it," David reassured me. "I'm the one who wanted to get married. Let's just wait for her to eventually give in." And so David and I became husband and wife. Yet even after that, his mother refused to acknowledge our marriage. "I will never accept this. I won't even attend the wedding," she said, pushing it even further. Because of this, we decided to put off the wedding ceremony. We still hoped to have her acceptance before we celebrated our union. Day after day, his father tried to persuade her, and both David and I continued to appeal to her, pouring our hearts out into every plea. But she remained stubborn and refused to give in. Eventually, even my parents visited his parents' house several times to try and talk her down. Even some of David's relatives suggested she accept our marriage. Finally, after all these earnest appeals from everyone around her, she relented. At last, we could proceed with the wedding ceremony. She still seemed discontented, but David and I began our preparations and finally set a date for our wedding. It was a year from the day we registered our marriage, essentially our first wedding anniversary. When our wedding day was finally set, David and I felt relieved, and before we knew it, the day of our wedding arrived. I was deeply touched, filled with joy that we were finally celebrating this day. I was finally able to wear the wedding dress that I had almost given up on. It felt like a dream come true. The wedding ceremony went smoothly at the church. and the reception began. Surrounded by the blessings of many attendees, I was overflowing with happiness. I owe it all to David, who stood by my side and led me here, even when I was feeling defeated and thought I wasn't worthy of marriage. I couldn't thank him enough. Seeing David all dressed up and looking so gallant and dependable made me so happy. As the reception proceeded, and we were about to retreat for a costume change, I noticed his mother taking the stage. It looked like she had asked the MC for permission to say a few words to the attendees, and so she started her speech on her own. Thank you all for coming to celebrate my son's wedding today. The truth is, the bride can't have children, and I've been against their marriage all along. I was about to leave my seat to change, but her words made me freeze on the spot. She had just mentioned something that shouldn't be said, especially not here at our joyful wedding celebration. The lively atmosphere in the venue quickly hushed to a silence. But my son was insistent, so I gave in and accepted their marriage. In the dead silent hall, mother-in-law's voice was the only one echoing. Frozen in place, I watched as David tried to approach mother-in-law and snatched the microphone. Mom, can you stop this? But David's attempts were smoothly evaded by mother-in-law, who wouldn't be stopped. Holding onto the microphone tightly, so as not to lose it, she continued to address the attendees. You see, I will never be able to hold a grandchild in my life. Can you believe such a dreadful story? Really, I don't understand why he chose a woman like this. I was flabbergasted by the barrage of harsh words. Beside me, David was struggling to contain his anger towards his mother's unhinged outburst. Then, mother-in-law dropped the bombshell. Well, as you can see, my daughter-in-law is a barren failure. But she's quite the career woman and makes good money, so I begrudgingly accepted their marriage. Mother-in-law chuckled loudly at her own words. She then looked at me and added one final jab. You should be grateful. It's thanks to me that you're having this day. With that, mother-in-law, appearing pleased, returned to her seat, having finished her utterly disgraceful speech. Had there ever been a more offensive speech? I was too stunned to even hear the voices around me. Urged by David and the venue staff, I was led out of the hall with my mind a blur. Once inside the dressing room, all the suppressed emotions came crashing in. Anger, sadness, the sense of loss from having our anticipated ceremony ruined. I was overwhelmed by my distaste for everything. I never wanted to see my mother-in-law's face again. I didn't want to return to a venue where such a person was present. As I was changing out of my current dress for the next one, I refused to put on the next dress and changed into my own clothes instead. I've had enough. I'm going home, I told David and ran out of the dressing room, towards the entrance of the venue. Catherine, wait a minute. Ignoring David's attempts to stop me, I jumped into a taxi that was parked at the entrance. I asked the driver to take me home. Having been humiliated by my mother-in-law in front of everyone at the reception, I couldn't contain my anger. I wanted to escape from there as quickly as possible. Our new home, where David and I had just started living, was a short 5-minute drive from the wedding venue. Upon entering our home, the tears I had been holding back flowed freely. I never dreamed that I would be treated so cruelly in front of a crowd on my wedding day. My happiness from yesterday had instantly turned into the worst despair. It's not like I chose to be infertile. And to expose that in front of so many people, especially on a day like this. Thoughts were racing through my head. While I was wiping away my tears, David arrived. Catherine, I'm truly sorry. Please forgive me. I never imagined my mother would say such horrible things. I'm sorry I couldn't do anything for you. David bowed deeply to me, offering words of apology. He explained that, as the groom, he couldn't afford to raise his voice against his mother's antics. I knew very well that David was a decent person, and besides, mother-in-law was the one at fault here. I didn't feel like blaming him at all.
Please, Catherine, let's go back to the wedding. I told my dad to keep my mom out of the venue. They're in the middle of a dress change, and it's a mingling time for the guests. We can still make it back in time. I don't want our reception to end in shambles like this. Please, let's go back together.
I nodded at David's plea. I decided to trust him and return to the wedding. I didn't want to cause any more pain for him, my supporter and my understanding companion. Moreover, I was reluctant to ruin the reception we had both painstakingly prepared for. Apologizing to David for rushing back home in a huff, we made our way back to the venue. In the taxi, we held hands, promising to see our wedding reception through to the end. Once we returned and entered the family waiting room, we found my mother-in-law surrounded by relatives. It was clear from her exhausted expression that she had been heavily reprimanded. Seeing my face, mother-in-law approached me.
"Oh, Catherine, I'm so sorry. Can we just pretend that earlier incident never happened?"
She lowered her head slightly towards me, pleading for forgiveness in a childish voice. It was a complete turnaround from the smug face she had displayed at the reception. "What? How could you even suggest that? After the humiliation you caused in front of so many people? How can you say let's just forget it all happened?" My anger resurfaced at mother-in-law's insolent behavior. The audacity of asking for forgiveness after what she had done was beyond my comprehension. Why was she seeking forgiveness in the first place when she didn't even want to accept me? She could have just left things the way they were if she disliked it so much. I expressed my unwillingness to forgive her to my mother-in-law and started preparing to get back to the ceremony. "Don't be like that. I'm apologizing, so why won't you forgive me? I had no idea that one of your relatives was a key client of our company." My maternal uncle, as it turns out, runs a significant client of my father-in-law's company. Apparently, while I was away, he had given mother-in-law a serious dressing down. He had even hinted at stopping the business transaction. Thanks to my father-in-law's desperate apologies, the situation was barely kept under control. I immediately understood why mother-in-law was apologizing. It wasn't out of guilt or regret towards me, but for her own self-preservation. I was so astounded that I was at a loss for words. It was then that David, who had been silently watching our exchange, finally spoke up.
"Mom, is that your idea of an apology? Aren't you disrespecting Catherine too much? And you're apologizing to her just because you were scolded by a client."
My mother-in-law looked blankly at David, who had raised his voice suddenly. It was rare for him to lose his temper like this, as he was typically calm and collected. It was understandable that mother-in-law was taken aback.
"Do you even understand how much you hurt Catherine, Mom? You made light of our most sensitive issue in front of everyone at our wedding. As a person, that's the worst thing you could do. No matter the reason, it's unforgivable to casually bring up someone's health issues like that."
David didn't hold back, continuing to shout at mother-in-law. He let out all the pent-up feelings he had towards his own mother. He had witnessed firsthand how his mother-in-law had hurt me time and time again, using my infertility as a weapon. The worst of it all was her outrageous behavior at today's reception. David's gaze upon his mother was filled with disdain.
"I'm done with you. Consider yourself without a son. If you can't accept Catherine as my wife, that's your problem. What you say doesn't affect us. Our family doesn't concern outsiders."
A complete disavowal. David finally laid it out for my mother-in-law. He declared he had no intention of associating with her from here on out. As far as he was concerned, he had no mother. That's what he told my mother-in-law. "David, don't say things like that. I really want to celebrate you. Don't be angry, okay? I won't say anything more. Let's lift the mood and enjoy the wedding, shall we?" His mother turned sickly pale at David's words. In a fluster, she tried to gauge his mood. However, there was nothing she could say now that would make David listen.
Today's not only about me, it's about Catherine too. We're a team, we're one. Looking down on Catherine is just like looking down on me. I get it, you don't want to celebrate us, so just leave now. Get out.
Her apologies were nothing more than self-preservation. There was no sincerity towards me. David told her mercilessly to get out. He told her that I was his only family.
I can't believe this, David.
Upon hearing David's words, his mother stood there dumbfounded. It seemed she hadn't expected such clear repulsion from her son. A cold gaze was cast upon her by David, me, David's father, and the rest of the relatives. Having lost all allies and standing alone, she finally accepted the reality. Her only option was to leave the scene. After she had gone, I quickly changed my dress, took David's hand, and we returned to the venue hand in hand. Guests who were oblivious to the turmoil that had occurred. Although we had kept them waiting for a considerable length of time, they welcomed us back with a round of applause. It seemed like everyone had sensed the situation and kindly waited for us. I was truly grateful for this warm atmosphere. And the wedding reception, now devoid of my mother-in-law, proceeded smoothly, with David and I preparing to give our final speech. We made sure to apologize sincerely for the disruption caused by my mother-in-law, and so we managed to conclude our reception without further ado. Following this, true to David's declaration, we decided to completely distance ourselves from my mother-in-law. David changed his contact information, making sure no communication came through from her. He even proposed that we move homes, even though we'd just settled into our new one. Realizing David's firm intent to sever all ties with mother-in-law, I agreed to the move. The moving expenses were covered by my father-in-law, citing the troubles caused by my mother-in-law, and we promptly relocated to our new home. After ensuring our move was complete, father-in-law took the opportunity to serve mother-in-law with divorce papers. Father-in-law, too, had long harbored resentment towards mother-in-law's behavior towards me, and the incident at the wedding was the final straw. While a sincere apology ensured that our uncle, who was also a business associate, did not sever ties with us, he was completely fed up with my mother-in-law. Mother-in-law was expelled from her family home, forced to embark on a lonely new life. Since David and I have no involvement, we have no idea about mother-in-law's whereabouts or her current state. Rumors suggest that due to the disgraceful display at the wedding, no family members are willing to aid her, and she is living a lonely, harsh life. Apparently, she's residing in a budget apartment, barely making ends meet by working part-time jobs from morning till night. On the other hand, David and I are enjoying a harmonious married life. We have no children, but even without the blessing of children, we can live together for the rest of our lives, as long as we continue to respect and grow with each other every day. We can always be happy. David and I believe this, as we join hands and face our future together. Our hopes spread toward the future we are building together.